reports from major events. So I was thinking the BMX one, we often get the Crankworks event come in and talk to us about the impacts that the event has had. My understanding from Andrew Wilson, Chief Executive across at Rotorua NZ, is with us having handed the responsibility of major events and those venues across to him and to deliver on the event strategy, the intent is that he's coming back to the May meeting where he will provide some metrics of what success should be measured, and those will then go into the final statement of intent, and moving forward it creates that expectations about what major events will be measured against.
Thank you.
Any other questions for JP or feedback on the SOI? Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through the Chair, thank you, JP. Just out of the two recommendations you put on, could I just ask you, when you say detail the business park story, could you break that down for what it is you actually want to put? How would you put that into the SOI?
Councillor, I think what we've found there is that there has been a sort of an information gap, particularly back into iwi. So one of the things that is probably worth referencing in the draft statement of intent, and probably that bullet point needs to be split into two parts. So detailing the business park history, they came up with a master plan, which should be referenced, and they've done a bunch of work around what could potentially be actively used within the airport. So there's a master plan. There's a number of detailed sort of limitations, constraints, pieces of work that have been undertaken, and then through to the master plan or the plan that's been created now for the development of that site. So just talking about chronologically what's been undertaken as part of that development work, and then separate to that, identify an engagement plan around that.
Thank you. So forgive me, so that's the business plan that at the moment the board has, sorry, I don't want to say rejected, is placed on hold a more appropriate?
You want to?
Through you, Madam Chair, Councillor O'Brien, my understanding is the board have reconsidered the timing rather than the merits of that plan, and so we're looking forward to engaging with them to understand what the proposed timing of that is, and the recommendation staff have put forward in the changes to the SOIs that we include an explicit direction that the iwi engagement aspect of the plan is strengthened from what we've seen in the past. That's where that's at the moment.
Thank you. So forgive me again, how do you break that down into the SOI? Like, if we say iwi engagement, how are you saying you want more detail on that, or to break that down further?
Again, it's the intent. So if we formally feed back and say there's an expectation that the board puts in place an iwi engagement plan, the intent of what would be listed probably in the SOI is exactly that. An engagement plan will be developed as during this year to ensure good communications with iwi around the proposed business park. You know, it's that kind of statement to come into the SOI to give us a point of saying, has that been achieved across the year?
Could I just pass on this feedback, if I may, Madam Chair? I have raised previously, and I go back to when the airport was made international and various activities were undertaken, not only around the airport but the locals around. We had the Marae, Kura, Rotokawa. I hope that we sort of expand that past just iwi engagement, so where it's the actual locals are getting an opportunity to be involved in what those plans look like and input. So I would just ask if we could consider that in some way. Thank you. Thank you. Very good report. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor O'Brien. Any further comments or questions? Councillor Patterson.
Sorry, Madam Chair, I should have asked this one before. Just going back to the SOI itself, the document, there was another graph on page 25 that talks about the targeted rate as part of Council's funding for this, budgeted for 5.048 million and then going up over the next few years. Do we have any data to say that we're going to reach that or exceed that at this point? I know David was saying we don't still know yet, but are we getting any closer to that?
Councillor, I
was just checking what page are you talking about?
So in the actual SOI document.
SOI of Rotorua NZ?
Yes, so page 25, there's a graph there. and it has operating budgets, revenue in that graph.
Sorry, my 25 doesn't have that. Sorry, I'll just keep the...
Maybe I can just explain that the funding agreements we have with the airport and with Rotorua NZ are funds. So the money that comes in to fund them comes through their business and economic development targeted rate. You're correct. We actually collect more than we fund those two entities because there's other economic activities or business-based activities that are supported within the organisation. So my understanding, probably, David's not here, but we actually collect in excess of the $5.9 million that is currently passed directly to those two organisations in their funding agreements.
Thank you. That was what I was trying to get at, because we've raised before that we are keen to see, some of us at least, consideration given to that being refunneled back into the industry rather than just swallowed up by the general pool. And my other question was, just to be sure, the personnel costs, 6.8 million, is that correct? That's rather high.
What page are you talking? So
Same graph, page 25. Personnel costs under expenditure.
Might answer that, Councillor O'Brien. I think there'll be an opportunity for the Chief Executive of Rotorua NZ to present to you shortly, and might be an opportunity, rather than council staff speaking on behalf of often independent entities, line items, might be better to direct those questions there.
Okay, thank you.
Which actually, I think, following on from the Chief Executive's comments, you've got both of the CCOs reporting back over the next couple of months of meetings, so maybe that's a really good time just to confirm how much of their grant goes as salaries.
yeah, JP, I just wanted, if you wanted to comment too, that currently it's general rate funding that we are passing across to Rotorua NZ to deliver the event strategy as well, and so there is an opportunity if the economic development target rate exceeds the amount that we currently agreed under the service level funding agreement, that money effectively be taken from the general rate payer.
Through you, Madam Chair, that's correct. So whilst we've talked about the specific funding currently was directly from the business and economic development targeted rate, the transfer of events and venues and the major events funding across to Rotorua NZ was actually from the general rate. So that's a chance for us to recalibrate where those funding sources come from.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Barker.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the report, JP. It actually follows on probably about the events and venue strategies part of the work for Rotorua NZ. In the purpose on page 9, at number 3, our purpose, it doesn't, this is just some feedback, I don't know whether it needs to be included or not, I just noticed that there's not an awful lot of mention around the events and venues. Page 9 of the actual SOI itself, it says number 3, our purpose. It doesn't actually mention much about the events and venues or the strategy, although later in the document, of course, it does, but I just wondered if there's a space there to maybe flesh out the purpose of RNZ with some of those factors. That's just a feedback. Thank you.
A typo, okay.
Yeah, just a typo, JP. On page 13 of the SOI, you've got the same line twice. Council and private sector-led major events will be leveraged to attract more visitors to the destination, and then it's in further down, just council and private sector-led major events are leveraged to attract more visitors to Rotorua. So it's just in twice, that's all. Thank you.
Okay, sorry, my page numbering seems to be
13.
13. Okay, JP's taken a note of that. Anything else? So you've got the staff proposed feedback. We do have a decision later on in confidential, JP, but I just wondered whether succession planning in terms of skill sets for both boards should be something that they could be asked to potentially look at. I suggest too that we do split the feedback for the airport with the business park story, and then have a separate line in iwi engagement, and then potentially wider, I suppose, affected neighbours, if you want to use that terminology. Councillor O'Brien?
Yes, Madam Chair, local community, is just as long as it's localised feedback. You know, we do have, families with buried loved ones, family connections out there. So I just hope we learn the lessons from the last major issues out there.
So I think there's a piece around the iwi engagement, which is not only with iwi, but the actual families that were affected when the airport land was taken. So I think if it could be broken down into those categories, JP. Is there any other feedback? We've obviously still got some metrics to come from Rotorua NZ around the major events. And we're still working off the priorities that are currently that this council is working on, given that this goes through till next year. And so if there is a new incoming council and they decide to change priorities, by the time they change that, that will be in time for the letter of expectation to go to Rotorua NZ and the airport in December this year, in anticipation of a new SOI coming for the new council at about this time next year. So that was just a comment that I think was appropriate. I think it had been raised before. So I'm just wondering if we, just for that motion, we are going to submit the comments that JP has mentioned, which are the ones in the paper, and split out the ones for the airport. I don't know, Komati, if you could bring that up. So we'll take perhaps if we just put detail wider community engagement that cover the wording that you're suggesting, Councillor O'Brien. I think we'll just do a different bullet point. And succession planning, that one, or succession planning. And then just on the Rotorua NZ one. I think there was just that addition in the purpose to more, to highlight more the events and venues.
And just allowing Komati to keep typing, Madam Chair, I just wonder if it's worth then deleting the sentence starting point, which was staff have provided the informal feedback, because now we're turning it into a council feedback resolution.
Yes, that's thanks, JP. So just checking then, if everyone can just confirm, so we're suggesting this other additional feedback to the Rotorua Airport and to Rotorua NZ, remembering it's for them to take on board these comments. They don't necessarily have to accept the feedback, but they can, you'll have an opportunity to talk to both the Chair and the CE when they come to present, but this is feedback from Council and from staff for the amendments to the SOI for the next financial year. So I'm happy to move, unless there's, Councillor Brown?
Just a question, Madam Chair, through you to Councillor O'Brien, perhaps. Could we just scan up detail wider community feedback? Should that be engagement?
Maybe it should be detail wider community engagement around the business park.
Thank you.
Clarify that, Councillor Brown and Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The only other one I would bring up, which we've previously discussed, would be options around how we could acknowledge the history of the airport.
So
but whether you're happy for that to be included as part of a business park story, I'd be happy with that.
Come out as
Thank
out
you.
of that.
We put it on record here, so I think that's fine.
Okay.
Thank you.
So we've now got detail the business park story. Do you want and history? Okay. Detail the wider detail. So that should be wider community engagement. Because it's okay. Just is everyone now comfortable with that? Because I'm happy to move that feedback go to the CCOs. It's seconded by Mayor Tetzel. I think we've had pretty good discussion on this morning, so I'll put that motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, thank you, that is carried. Moving now to page 19, 7.2 on the agenda, the update on the accessibility for all management policy. Can I have a mover and a seconder to receive the report, Council Update Accessibility for All Management Policy be received? Moved Councillor O'Brien, seconded by Councillor Maxwell. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, thank you, that's carried. Morena, Councillor Kirioka, I see you now online. Morena. And welcome to Kellyanne and to Alex.
Morena, Madam Chair and Councillors, and I'd just like to acknowledge those in the gallery that have come here to support this item today as well. This report has been provided to you as an information item. It does incorporate the guidance and the direction provided by yourselves through the workshop that we held in July of last year, and that's namely to apply this policy to new projects, renewals, and to fall within current resourcing levels. Before I pass over to Kellyanne, I did want to talk through before I pass to Kellyanne to talk through the key points, I wanted to confirm that as a management policy, the delegation for approving this sits with the executive. And so management policies relate to how we work internally. They govern our internal processes, procedures and operations. So in this case, as the policy guides council staff and how to deliver their work, and it considers plans for accessibility. It meets our management policy test in this regard. Great. All right, I'll hand over to Kellyanne and she'll talk you through where we've landed.
Tēnā tātou katoa. So the Council's RRC's inaugural Te Arawatia Accessibility for All policy has been adopted by our exec. As iterated by Alex, yes, it is a management policy, but we have thought it pertinent to bring it to this forum as Council have been quite pivotal in the establishment of this policy and support for it. Some key kind of points, obviously, taken as read in your agenda papers. But a couple of things I would like to reiterate and then a few acknowledgements. There are four main aspirations that have guided this policy, and those aspirations have been derived directly from members of the Rotorua disability community through engagements with them. Those four aspirations have been one, that council show local leadership in improving accessibility across the district. That we provide for deliberate, thoughtful design that improves access for all, that we aspire for the independence and dignity and joyful lives of our disability community, and that we assure their disability of visibility, inclusion and representation. The this is really important for Rotorua, and the reason is that, well, there's a number of reasons, but some key ones are the disability community make up 25% of our community. That's approximately 20,000 people. And this figure is predicted to rise. There's some key drivers to that number. We see nationally that disability, the high prevalence of disability in Māori communities, high prevalence of disability in aged populations and in lower socioeconomic, and these are areas that greatly impact our community as well. So Rotorua is well represented in all those demographics. It's been really important, and we're all in agreement that a formal commitment to guide operational and resourcing decisions to ensure a better, more inclusive, engaging and more empowering Rotorua for a significant proportion of our population is the right thing to do for our communities. Our communities also, when we spoke with this community, they also told us that yes, it's the right thing to do by them and for us as a wider population, but it also would open up an opportunity in a very niche tourism market that currently we aren't able to tap into. They told us that members of the disability community do a lot of work to research and find locations that are easy for them to access when they want to go on holidays, and often when they're going on holidays, they're not just going as one. They typically have their family and friends that they're travelling with. So disability tourism is not just we're not looking at just a single visitor, but we're looking at probably 3 or 4 that would accompany them. Last year we workshopped with you, you will remember, and you gave us some really clear guidance. You gave us clear that yes, you thought that it was important for us to do a better job for inclusion for some of those most excluded and therefore vulnerable members of our community. And the scope that you provided us was that a policy that will provide guidelines, you expected a policy that would provide guidelines and expectations for how we achieve our vision within the limitations of the current long-term plan resourcing envelope. So that's the scope that we've developed this policy within. You did also underscored through some of the comments that we should be guiding activities between now and the next LTP for diverse council departments to review their current state, to identify and prioritise activities for improvement, and where required, plan for resourcing approval in the next LTP cycle. So that's the premise that we've developed the policy around. And finally, just some acknowledgements. I really want to acknowledge on behalf of the team, elected members for your support in establishing this inaugural policy. It's quite a big deal. In particular, Councillor O'Brien, who's championed this policy from beginning. To the members of staff whose intimate knowledge of their respective functions in council, what we already do really well, what in policy would be helpful to guide their practice, and who really interrogated what would work best. So that's been really helpful in making the policy better. And finally, but most importantly, the biggest acknowledgement must go to our amazing and diverse disability community, and I want to acknowledge Tim, and who's here with us today. It's been a real privilege, and I can't understate that, to sit with you and to hear your experiences and frustrations and how much your lives can be improved by more inclusively designed and considered council services, facilities and amenities. So yeah, that's kind of where I would like to go. And if there's one last point that I think rang really strongly for me is that that I heard from our community is that even when facilities meet a code or meet standard, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're fully accessible. So there's aspects I think that we can learn and grow and understand how better we can deliver to those needs. Kia ora.
Thank you very much, Kellyanne and Alex. So this was just for noting today. There's no requirement for us to have any resolution. This was a direction for a piece of work that was given by Council some time ago, but congratulations to the team. We've got this up and running. And thank you very much, Roger, for your contribution towards that. Are there any questions at this stage to the team around Councillor Lee?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you, thank you for updating us on all of this. Just a question about management policies. So I've just been checking on our council website. There's a whole bunch of policies that are now published there. I don't think they were at the start of the term, which is good. So this policy is going to be published on the council website, is it? Or is this the management policies? Are they sort of like a separate family of policies that?
I think we'll get Greg from the government to talk to that.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Councillor Lee. So we have a suite of management policies that sit on our internal intranet, if I want to call it that, our Pumanua, and that is for guidance of our staff and how we conduct ourselves. Examples of that would be, procurement policy and a lot of HR sort of type policies. And then the council policies will sit on our website that generally affect the general public.
Yes, so I see in our Stellar system we do have a folder called policies, but we don't have access to those policies, it seems, at this stage.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Chair. That folder was set up with the intention of policy creation through your term, not every single policy that we have, although I'll take your feedback on board, Councillor, and we can have a look at how we best fit that.
Yeah, I'd be interested in seeing what our policies are as an organisation, and that would be good.
Any other questions to Kellyanne or Alex of Councillor Patterson?
Just a bouquet to you for the work you've done, and I particularly note the comment about tourism and how important this is. I'll just give you a quick little anecdote. Cruise ships are money-making enterprises. That's what they're there for. And the best rooms on cruise ships are for those with disabilities. They're located at the stern of the ship. They are bigger, they have bigger balconies, they have everything going for them. And if you try and book them as a non-person who doesn't have a disability, they boot you out. So that tells you that they are investing significant money in supporting the disabled community, and they wouldn't be doing it unless there was a reason for it. So, well done.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Alex and Kellyanne, for that. So we'll move on now. Oh, Your Worship. Sorry.
Thank you. Sorry, I just really wanted to acknowledge the work that's gone in behind this, and also the separate work with Recreation Aotearoa that our staff have worked on for a number of years to make sure that our public spaces and outdoor spaces are also accessible. So I do want to acknowledge that not all disabilities are visible, and so appreciate the work and acknowledge that as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Moving on now back to JP, Progress Report, Housing, Consenting and Planning. I have a mover and a seconder to receive that report. Thank you, Councillor Lee and Councillor Barker. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, thank you, that's carried. JP will get you overview your report.
Good morning again, councillors. Just probably picking up on a couple of points to just talk briefly through. So I think it's on page 33. Again, we're just giving you that rolling picture of house builds up to the 31st of December. So as you say, we update every quarter to get that overall picture of what's happening and what's changing across the city. You'll see there that again we're still reporting sort of a fourth year of highest levels ever for house builds. So you can see both also the total house builds and the net number included. Just for information too, just down below that in graph 2, we've also broken it down by area, so just to give a feel for where some of those homes are going. There's been questions in the past about our contribution of homes towards the targets, the Housing Outcome Agreement for the IAF, which is about 3,000 homes by 2032, I think it is. So if you just look back on the areas that are cited in there, which is the Central and Western, for the 2023 and 24 calendar year, it's about 540 homes were built in the Central and Western area. And when you go to the graph on page 35, which talks to the pipeline moving forward, there's a just under 600 homes that have been identified in that pipeline that will be going into that central and western area. So those homes are likely to be delivered across the next couple of years. So again, that's a significant contribution towards achieving those best endeavours for us around the 3,000 homes. So that's a 4-year view. So councillors, other than that, I'm happy to answer off any other questions. You'll see in the written part of the report on page 36. Just some references there to a number of pieces of policy work coming back to you. So we've finished the housing and business assessment for 2024 and probably dropping the messaging from in advance of that report being presented to you. We've moved from a situation where we had a deficit in housing capacity to a surplus, so meeting our MPS UD requirements. So that'll be fleshed out in more detail that you'll see at the council report. And then we've also previously agreed a plan change program. So if you recall, having done the intensification plan changes, our priority was to then move into doing a plan changes on natural hazards, just to make sure that we're building homes and supporting homes and development in the right places. Industrial land. So again, stealing from my presentation for the council meeting, we're still in a deficit around industrial land. So that industrial plan change for new zoning will be critically important. So that was the second plan change process we were undertaking. And then thirdly, we were going to look at the business centres. Now that was before we had a big picture of the RMA reforms. So again, because of those coming through, we may be required to insert some other minor plan changes or sort of different plan changes as the government prioritises those for us. So happy to answer off any other questions on my report.
Thanks, JP. And just councillors and for the public, so what we're proposing to do is to do deep dives into each of the areas of JP's responsibility in different meetings, rather than just having one sort of very lightly done over conglomerate report. So this is the chance for JP to show all of the work that's been done in all of the areas relating to consenting, planning and housing. So questions, Councillor Patterson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, JP, for another great report. Just alluding to a comment you just made about the HBA, I believe that, if I recall correctly, that's connected with the MDRS discussion that we'll be having. I think you mentioned that would be May. Is that still on track?
No, Councillor. So again, the HBA is an input. So the Housing and Business Assessment gives you a picture of how successful we're being. If we had a deficit situation, we would be needing to talk to central government and advising Ministry for the Environment of what we were doing about addressing our deficit. So with a presentation of a surplus, that enables us to have a subsequent conversation about our district plan provisions. So as you're aware, the government has put through the option of exiting, amending or keeping the MDRS. Again, that is part of the RMA reforms which are being delayed, so we're not expecting the RMA decision piece to be complete until I think it's August. However, that's not the only piece that we need to consider. So as we've talked about the government's going for housing growth agenda, they will also be changing the MPSUD, which again was the other part of the framework we need to consider before we take any decisions around MDRS or changes to the district plan.
Sorry, subsequent question. So will that be in this term?
No.
Thank you.
I think, JP, just clarification, when we say we're ahead of our targets, this is zoned land, not actually built houses. So I think it's just sometimes just a little bit of a misnomer in terms of when we're discussing the housing targets.
Councillor, Madam Chair, you're absolutely right. It's housing capacity. So capacity is based on, and the formula that we'll go through in more detail with the HBA is zoned, infrastructurally enabled, commercially viable, and then there's another number which comes out which is reasonably expected to be realised. So those are the sort of the projections that give us a number which the government cites as either a sufficiency, a deficit, or a sufficiency of capacity.
Okay, Councillor Lee?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Actually, JP's just answered the questions that I was going to ask. So.
Okay, thank you. Councillor O'Brien?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through the Chair, thank you for your report, JP. Could I just ask, regarding the Nongataha development, is there any central government funding, since the government, supported this and fast-tracked that development, is there any central government funding available to us that we could apply to help with the road situation and the traffic that's going to be from that development?
No, Councillor. The funding that's going into that development is about that development. Obviously, the contributions they make to us are through development contributions, so we'll receive development contributions, but we don't levy any roading DCs.
Thank you. And there's no sort of supporting fund that we could approach the government and say, thank you for fast-tracking this. Now, could you help support the effects of this on the rest of the community?
No.
There is. Okay, thank you. My second question is just on the infill housing that's been announced by the government. Sorry, I don't know to what detail, I can only go by what they put out. Do we have any concerns there that will the people putting those projects together, is there requirements for them to notify council before those activities are undertaken? Because I've seen some, shall we say, commentary on social media, which implies people just think they can suddenly plonk down buildings left, right and centre. Could you take us through that very briefly?
Councillor, you're absolutely correct. I think in the media responses that came out around that announcement, there was a requirement that they notify the council in advance, and also at the conclusion of the project, so that files and rating and information on property files can be updated. It's really important, and we've already had fielded a couple of inquiries already, so the team have actually very quickly pulled together almost a little working group to try and make sure that we're in the best possible position to help people navigate successfully through those processes. And the issue you've highlighted is absolutely correct. We really do need to be there to help, because there is areas that you can't put homes, and obviously a classic example is we have some overhead power transmission lines which have a prohibition zone that no further homes can go under those power pylons, and also we've got some challenges around flood mapping and some flood areas. So those two areas that require some discussion with someone who's considering taking advantage of this ability to build a small unit around their home. And probably the last part of that too is just to make sure our services are also recognised in there, because often there is a sewer main or a stormwater easement that may run across a section. So unless they get a property information memorandum, a PIM, or a LIM, they may not have all the information that's required to safely place a home somewhere.
Thank you. If I may just have a supplementary to that. So could I ask you, would you mind just clarifying for me, do people with those projects have to seek our approval, or when you say they just have to notify us, is that literal?
My understanding that it's literal, unless we get that opportunity to give them that feedback to say, actually, you cannot build here, it is prohibited. So there will be areas that homes can't be placed, and that will be important feedback for us early on. So outside of those prohibited areas, they will just be able to proceed.
So could I just put something to you? So if people just have to notify us, not seek permission, if people who haven't had experience suddenly plonk a granny fat on top of a sewer main that they don't realise is there, how would they plan on repairing it? Should there be are we just going to say to them, sorry, you have to dig up your floorboards?
It's a very significant issue, and I'll throw across to the Chief Executive one.
Oh, apologies, sorry.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor O'Brien, through you, Madam Chair. Look, this is very, very pertinent questions, and we've had a discussion internally about what our response to this is, because clearly what the government's trying to do is enable housing. We want to get ahead of it, and for our customers, for our developers who want to take advantage of the opportunities provided under this law change, we want to make it clear to them what they need to consider and how they need to interact with us so that they're not disadvantaged in the future. And a lot of the questions you're raising are in that line. So what we are going to do, and look forward to an update in this committee in the coming months, is map out when those legislative changes come into effect, and then working back from that, what guidance we're going to publish to district residents and developers that have aspirations to take advantage of that legislation, of what we would both require and recommend for them to have good outcomes from this legislation change. So there's a work stream of that underway, and we'll look forward to giving you some updates here. But all very important questions that we need to answer systematically for our customers and our developers.
Okay, I think I'll leave that one alone. Thank you for those answers. And finally, could I just ask, at the next review that you've talked about, could I ask, is there an opportunity in the near future to review, say, Lakes A policy?
Councillor, Lakes A is overdue, absolutely. One of the challenges we've got when we adopted the district plan in 2016, I think it was, we were going to go immediately into rolling reviews, which would have had Lakes A zone fairly high up the priority list as being overdue for a review. Since then, we've actually been chasing our tail, literally, with plan changes foisted on us through things like the NPSUD or requirements just to move on to different timeframes. So Lakes A zone remains overdue and an important part of the plan to be reviewed. As I answered earlier, we still don't know what will be imposed on us to jump the queue of plan changes we should be looking at. And then separate to that, we've also got the announcements around a replacement for the RMA, which potentially undoes most of the zoning, bespoke zoning within local authorities. So there's two pathways here. We find it a position to do the review as it should do, assuming we don't have a number of other required plan changes on top of it, or the overall RMA reform that's coming in over the next couple of years may undo it with a more regionally based plan approach. So there's two pathways to have a Lakes A zone review.
Thank you for that answer. So can I ask you, is that likely to be this year?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Barker?
Actually, a part of my question was answered, I think, with Councillor O'Brien's question, because I was going to go from a more rural perspective and any changes to the zoning out in the rural areas and what that might look like, but you've probably answered anyway.
Councillors, to prolong it, one of the things that we're also intending to bring to you next month is we've shown you some of the graphs of housing development pipelines and the number of house builds over the last few years. We've done a bit of what I call the rear view mirror look. So we've looked back at the 4 years worth of house builds that have occurred since about 2021. And it's about 2,000 homes that have been built across the district, and done a significant amount of analysis about what we've seen developed over those 4 years. It gives us the chance to reconcile that against the projections that we saw in the 2021 HBA and the 2024, but it also gives us a chance to look at where the market has driven housing. And so we've seen probably a higher proportion of homes going into the rural area than we would have expected from a provincial city or council. So the question is why? So there's a number of policy questions we need to be taking out of that analysis, which may lead to what nuances and changes do we need to do to our plan change program moving forward. So some of that information will come back next month, and I think it's another really important input into understanding what we need to do about changing and improving and making sure our district plan is workable and useful for enabling housing choice in our district.
Thank you, JP, because with that extra growth in the rural does come some challenges, and so that's what I was alluding to. But thank you very much for your answer.
Councillor Patterson?
Thank you for your leniency, Madam Chair. Just touching on what you've just said, have we, when you're doing your, I guess you could say, analysis of the types of buildings that have been enabled, particularly some of the areas like Kotu and Kawaha Point, are you looking into any of the social changes that have happened into those communities with the typology of those homes, and seeing has that any impact on those communities?
Good question, Councillor. No, we're purely looking at housing types, builds, affordability, so social change or impacts of intensification are not sort of in the social scoping of the work we're doing.
But who would do that?
I think Kellyanne's team would be probably the team that would probably look back at some of that stuff. So within Alex's group, that sort of community understanding of social cohesion. But I suppose the flip side of that is when you start looking at objectives included within things like the NPSUD, compact urban form, good transport links, viability of shopping centres. There's a whole bunch of other stuff which is also part of that matrix of what a successful community looks like. So it would be quite a substantial piece of work, I would think.
Thank you, because some of the feedback I've been getting from those communities is not great regarding the negative aspects of that. The positive aspects that we're working towards, excellent, but the consequences of over-concentration might not be what we're hoping for. Moving on from that, sorry, there was one point here, point 6 on that page, page 36, talking about the on-site detention. Now, I understand that we're the only council that's required to do that. Is that correct?
Councillor, I might just also loop my colleague Stavros into this. One of the challenges there's a regional policy statement requirement that for Greenfield, that the baseline of a development has a 20% reduction in stormwater requirements. So that leads to new developments requiring on-site attenuation or detention. So something like Pukehangi will require a number of detention ponds before water could come off the Pukehangi area and move into our stormwater network in the rest of the city or into the Utahina. Because we've kicked off this piece of work around hazard mapping, the Regional Council has also started to ask questions about the potential around imposing similar sort of reductions on infill and redevelopment within the city footprint. That's very challenging. You can imagine the challenges of redeveloping a current home or breaking it up into two, or putting a 70 square metre granny flat on the back and saying you actually need to retain a whole bunch of stormwater on site. As a city and as a community, we collect development contributions which are intended to help improve our stormwater network and actually address that. So the kind of the comment that I've alluded to here in our frustration is to suggest that there's a double charge by saying, hey, you're contributing to our network improvement, as well as having to store or attenuate stormwater on site. And if I throw across to Stavros, he might have a shorter answer, which in his view describes whether that's a useful actual intervention.
Thank you, JP. Just very briefly, I think JP explained the overall stormwater master plan we have, and part of it obviously is where we have greenfield development. I think it seems to be sensible and reasonable to require attenuation of stormwater within the greenfield development. However, where you have densification or around field improvements, the suggestions proposed by some parts of our colleagues in the regional council are both costly, ineffective hydraulically, and hugely inefficient compared to community storage. If you do consider the volume of water you can attenuate in the Linton Park attenuation dam, it's about 300,000 cubic meters, compared to storage tank in each individual house in the densification area, would accumulate potentially, let's say 1,000 houses can attenuate about 1,000 cubic meters, but the cost efficiency is 60 times more efficient to do it as a communal attenuation than as an individual house. Volume-wise, it's more than 60% more effective to do it a communal attenuation instead of individual tank property. So we're working through these processes with our colleagues and pretty comfortable we'll see some reason and sensible solutions to that. Thank you.
Thank you.
No further questions. Thank you, councillors. Thank you, JP. Move on now to the progress report from the Community Experience team on page 38. And welcome to Alex and her team, which I'm sure you'll introduce, Doreen, Julianne and Joe. This is the first report that we've had in this space now, so Alex has a presentation
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll see if I can drive this thing.
Sorry, I'll just need to receive the report. So, mover and seconder, thank you to Councillor O'Brien, Councillor Patterson. All those in favour, please say aye to receive. Thank you. That's carried. Sorry, Alex.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, first off, can I please welcome Julianne Wilkinson, who's our Director of the Library, and Laurie Timmer, who is our Manager of Customer Solutions, and Stuart Brown, our Manager of the Museum, Director of the Museum. He's away, but we have Joe here if there's any specific questions around the museum or the museum work that we might need to answer for you. Yes, look, I just decided to pull together a really brief presentation, and I promise I'll keep it brief. As a first run through of this new sort of reporting format that we've come up with. I did just want to acknowledge that really this does mark the recommencement, I guess, of reporting across this new group, the Community Experience Group. We're looking to report every 2 months. And this month we're reporting across 3 areas, so the library, the museum and customer solutions. Active and engaged communities, Councillor Barker last week mentioned that that would be the last time that it came to INE, so in the next 2 month period it'll appear here. And then community engagement, we have Kellyanne has brought a couple of specific reports, so we feel like the bulk of that work, the work of that team is being covered off separately, so they will be in our report next time. Just a little bit of a reminder about how young we are as a group. So we came together in November. I started at the end of January, so newbie. But look, there's some real synergies about having us all together, and we're starting to really, I guess, get under the hood of kind of why we're together, what we're looking to achieve, and how do we measure that. The purpose of the group really was around delivering excellent customer services across our functions, so that's where you'll see some of our metrics are really focused on that. And what we've been able to pull out is specifically outcome areas that are within the LTP, but we also have some existing non-LTP measures as well. Moving to really the guts of the report, I just wanted to point out for this table in particular, we're presenting metrics that demonstrate progress towards annual targets. And I've presented the previous year totals as a bit of a reference. So when you see the year-end total for 2024, that's through until the 30th of June, but we're reporting the progress up till the end of February. Just pulling out some key observations for you. I think while we're running a little bit behind in customer interactions and program participation for the library, it's largely driven by staff resourcing. It's actually worth noting, I guess, that that's still a very impressive level of interaction. For core services at 285,000 year to date, that kind of equates to about 35,000 interactions per month. So it's pretty impressive for the group. The library team have also noted to me that with the recruitment of the vacancies that they've had, we're already seeing a big jump in numbers for March. So we're really confident that the numbers will continue to recover as we near the end of the financial year. The team are, though, however, doing some work into understanding what's driving the decline in the physical book and computer logins. We are seeing increases, though, particularly in the research requests and e-book issuing. We've also marked fundraising for the museum exhibition as amber. However, we do have a number of initiatives that we're commencing now to continue that fundraising effort. And we're on track, we're marking ourselves as on track for the museum exhibition project now that we have the PSG group established and have had their first meeting. In terms of our non-LTP measures, this table presents the data on comparison to year to date from the previous year, so end of February 2024 versus end of February this year. There's some real successes, I think, to celebrate across our customer solutions team. A really good outcome for customer solutions is to see a reduction in calls, so less is better, and emails over time as well. And that really just means that people are being able to source information readily themselves through a self-service, or they're able to find what they need through our websites and systems. While we're seeing email traffic increasing slightly, it's pretty marginal, we're seeing some really good downward trends, particularly attributed to system improvements, particularly the introduction of One Council, and having a move to rates invoices being received by email. And we believe that's really resulting in more online banking transactions. We've also seen a 16% increase in resolution rates from this time last year, and really what that means is now 52% of customers, when they call through, they'll be getting a resolution at their first point of contact with council. So that's pretty impressive, 16% increase over 12 months. We'd like to see that continue. We'd love to get that up to about 70%. So no pressure there, Laurie and team. For the museum, we actually saw a 6% increase on the previous year for out-of-town schools engaging in our education programs, but that's offset by quite a significant drop in the local school participation, and that's largely driven by teacher shortages locally. So less teachers available to run those courses within schools, as well as increased transportation costs. And I'll talk about that in the risk section a little bit more about what we're doing about that. The door count at the library is also confirming lower numbers of visitors, and again that's one area that we'll be looking to do a bit of a deep dive into. We've got a review of our programs and services planned for June. We think a contributing factor could be Wi-Fi accessibility and e-book demand, perhaps contributing, meaning people don't have to come into the physical building as much. But we will report back. Just moving on to challenges and risks. We're progressing our planning for the museum exhibition funding. We've got some fundraising proposals that are in train at the moment, and we're working with our partners, Friends of the Museum and the Museum Centennial Trust, to scope further fundraising opportunities. It is worth noting that there is some existing or earlier successful fundraising at risk if the exhibition project does not recommence by the middle of the year. So it came with some caveats, that original fundraising money. We have been experiencing some high levels of turnover in customer solution in the library teams. That's not an unusual thing for customer solutions particularly. However, when you are running low on resources, it does put pressure onto the remaining staff. So we're looking and exploring alternative recruitment strategies to reflect the nature of that kind of call centre environment. As a point of interest for councillors, last year 27% of those that did resign from customer solutions actually went on to other roles within council. So it is a credible pathway for people to have kind of long and successful careers within council. So that's a win for us as well. The impact of the library carrying vacancies can actually be seen in the program data. So we can see that when we have a full contingent of people, we can then run more programs and have more engagements. While we do expect that to recover now that we're fully resourced, I think, as of last week, it does highlight a delivery risk we need to manage. So if we have a target within the LTP that says this, and we know that if we don't have the staff to deliver it, then that makes it difficult for us to deliver. So how do we avoid that or mitigate that risk? We do have, in terms of the increased transportation costs, we do have a discussion with Ngāti Whakaue Endowment Trust to discuss the impact of the increased transportation costs, as they are one of our big funders of that. In the report, we've got a section on forward focus. I guess the point I'd like to make is there's actually a lot of operational activity going on, so we've been quite deliberate with this report to keep it quite strategic and high level. And I guess for us, the key pieces of strategic work that we have coming up are looking to keep pushing the organisation to utilise our customer solutions team and the knowledge base that they have that supports our customers as a way to get information first time, one-off, true and correct, and actually to trust the call centre process. We're also looking at improving the customer experience by trialling some kiosks. So that's a self-service portable kiosk. We'll trial it downstairs, but if successful, there's potential that people can access services on those kiosks from other council locations. So we're excited to see what the levels of use of that might be. We strive to continue to make our library events, programs and services meet the needs of our community, and we'll be commencing some evaluation work that really seeks to underpin a bit of a reset of that event partnership and promotion work, and that's planned for June. We do have an important piece of policy work that is planned in the museum space, and that's a policy around loaned items. We really do need strong criteria to help drive decision making on which offers of loaned material we accept. Loaned material, while fantastic, is providing a basis for expanding the museum collection, does come at a cost in terms of storage and insurance, and we just want to make sure it fits with our objectives of the museum in terms of this place and our people. Not contained within the presentation, but included in your report, I've got a small section on community and customer sentiment, where we've received some really lovely feedback on some of the service and events we've put on, and that we just really wanted to share that with you. I don't know about you, but we often hear the negative and don't always get exposed to the positive, and we want to keep building on this kind of positive or sentiment, understanding good, bad, otherwise, and so you'll see us continuing to build on that section in future reports. Right, that's the whirlwind overview. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks very much, Alex. I'd just like, Andrew, if you could just make a couple of comments. This is the first time that we'll see the museum exhibition come back to this committee, so you'll continue to hear the build program being reported through the I&E committee. But I'll just ask Andrew if you just make a couple of comments.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and firstly great to see Alex and the group up and running and getting some data out there, and particularly some customer data, which I'm sure you'd know I'm delighted to see. Just wanted to make a point about the museum exhibit. So Alex has noted it as a risk at the moment. It's noted that way simply because there's a gap between what we estimate the total exhibition funding to cost and what we have fundraised. As you know, there's a process in place with the project steering group for the exhibition that's been stood up, and next committee meeting, you will get an update from that project steering group that will give council some options for direction going forward. So I just wanted to identify why that was identified as a risk. It's not that we're not making progress on the pathway we've identified. It's just from a fundraising perspective, we haven't got to where we suspect we may need to, but we have got a way forward. And the second part I just want to mention is we've got some data and metrics up here because, again, I've encouraged the team to go with the data that we've got. Expect that to evolve over time because we have a separate organisation-wide piece of work for us to understand whether the data that we're currently gathering and monitoring ourselves, is it the right data? Is it going to help us make decisions going forward, or is it simply looking back? So again, take this, but also expect some change over time as we further refine what we're measuring and monitoring. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew, and welcome to Laurie. I think this is your first meeting that you've appeared at. So Laurie runs the customer services team. So are there any questions for the team? We'll take them through Alex probably in the first instance, if that's easier. Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for your report. And it kind of leads on from comments you've just made, Mr. Chief Executive, regarding the museum fundraising. It mentions in there that there is a risk of losing some of the initial funding, if not, I guess you could say, progress has been made by mid-year. What do you mean by mid-year?
I believe, through you, Madam Chair, I believe the date in those funding agreements was June.
June.
Yep. So we'll get, we've timed our report back to come to you in May. So we're looking at making sure we don't lose that or have that as a risk going forward.
Right. So you mentioned that you're working with the Museum Centennial Trust and Friends of the Museum as are they your main partners with regards to how you're going to come up with this money?
We wouldn't exclude anyone from assisting us with fundraising, but they have been deeply involved in the museum over many years, so they're kind of our critical stakeholders.
Right, thank you. So
I'll just get Andrew to make a little further comment on that as well.
Yeah, thank you. And look, this is just a preview of a conversation that's going to come in much more detail next month. But what I can say is, again, before we actually activate all of the different opportunities and really engaged groups we've got throughout the district who want to contribute to the museum exhibition, it was important that we go through the step of giving this council, through a project steering group, the assurance and your confidence that the design was heading in the right direction. So we believe we've taken the steps that this council directed us to, and once you see the result of that at the next meeting, we'll be able to go all guns blazing, activate the Centennial Trust, but other groups, if they're interested and have capacity within a fundraising strategy, to be able to deliver that. So again, it's just a function of where we are in the process, and as Alex has said, we're moving so that we can eliminate that risk to that funding over the next month or so.
great, thank you.
Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through the Chair. Thank you, ladies, very much for your reports, much helpful. If I may, Madam Chair, could I just seek clarification? So the actual, rebuild, restoration of the museum will continue through I&E, but more the museum sort of type exhibition operations will be through this committee. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you. Just wanted to clarify that. Alex, could I just ask the discussion with Ngāti Whakaui Tribal Authority regarding transport? Sorry, could you just break that down a little bit more for me?
Sorry, apologies, it should have been Endowment Trust.
Noted. Yep.
They provide essentially a subsidy for schools to get to our education projects, so they cover the bus transportation costs in particular. But we've seen big increases in those costs, so those subsidies aren't fully covering or being exhausted beforehand. So we want to re-engage with them just to say, look, last time we set this amount was about 5 years ago. We're seeing big increases in the cost of petrol. Let's have a conversation on what that looks like.
Great, thank you very much.
And just on that point, I think you mentioned there was an increase in the out-of-town students. So do they pay to cover the cost, or is it if they're using library?
There is a payment. Joe can probably give you the specifics though.
Yes, those out-of-town schools do pay, and we reviewed those fees post-council reviewing the education team, and they are user pays now, completely user pays.
That's great to hear. Thank you very much. Councillor Lee, followed by Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you, thank you, ladies, for your reports. On page 38, I'll just read out point number 1. From the bottom, the outcome areas for this group include library, provide equitable and inclusive access to a diverse range of library services to connect and strengthen our people through improved literacy, knowledge, cultural enrichment, health, employment, well-being and creativity. Perhaps before your time, Alex, about a year ago, we had the library was going to host some drag queens to our library. Would that fall under that particular category there?
Sorry, Councillor Lee, might you not direct a question to Alex around something that happened before the time?
Well, I'm actually referring to whether perhaps a future drag queen might like to come along and present to our council. So my question is...
Point of order, Madam Chair, relevance. It has nothing to do with this excellent report.
Councillor Lee, maybe if you just want to reframe the question then?
Yeah, I don't know how it couldn't be relevant because I'm reading from the report. So my question is, who makes the decision about whether drag queens could potentially come along in future?
I think that's sort of a hypothetical question now. That's an event that's happened in the past, so I think...
Well, no, drag queen events are happening all around the country, Madam Chair. There's a recent one in Auckland. So the question is around the decision-making that leads to such an event happening.
Well, I think operationally that's for the team to manage. So I think we'll move on. Councillor Barker, followed by Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
This is outrageous.
Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Alex, for your report. Great to see some progress on all of those things that you reported today. Welcome, ladies, to the Council Chamber today. My question is around the request for service and the front of house. Great to see that there's a kiosk trial going on. That's neat for people to be able to come in and actually interact themselves with that system. I'm sort of looking forward to how we track maybe interactions on our request for service platform, and whether that platform will ever be able to be accessed remotely by people who live further out in the district, and is that a possibility first, and then will there be a possibility within that system to be able to close the loop and actually people to follow their request to resolution? It might be perhaps more of an IT question, but is that something that's on the horizon for our Council?
Did you want to talk to that, Laurie? We're just at the moment just looking at the portal that will be soft launched next month, which you will be able to register and look and see your balances of your account or lodge your request. So that is coming for rural people as well too.
Great. So that's the first part, and the second part will probably be, will the request for service process be added on to that eventually? Is that my understanding?
Correct, yeah. So to answer the question around, you will be able to track where your queries are up to in that system. So that's the long term.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
The C is just on it, no? Okay. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just as an extension of what Councillor Barker raised, is the ultimate goal to move to an app-type online application to interface with the portal? Because I find it laborious to sit down at a laptop and report something, which would be much easier on a phone.
I think the CE's got something he wants to add to that.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Brown, and then through you, Madam Chair. That's a really interesting question around whether the right mobile interface is an app or a web-enabled browser. Mm-hmm. And so those questions are coming. The first step, well, actually not the first step, but a couple of steps down the track is getting these modules up and running and interacting with the core system so that the user data is accessible through the portal itself. And then what skin you wrap around that, so whether it's an app interface or a web-enabled browser, is part of the customer experience discussion that'll come towards the end of that implementation process. But definitely on the radar, and the teams implementing that will consider what's the right user experience to use it, and certainly don't want one that's clunky.
Perfect, thank you. Another question. Technology-based, I think the libraries, and how we interface with information is changing, obviously, as quickly. So potentially, what we're seeing now in reduction of visits will carry on. I guess at some point in time, is the library fit for purpose in terms of size and what we're offering, and is that on the radar as well?
Through you, Madam Chair, as a regular review of the library and what programs are in demand, we sort of do a 12-monthly review. So we want to be able to track that and then say, well, what does that mean for us in terms of the future? So it will be an iterative process. I think what we are seeing, there is still a demand for those wraparound services that underpinned the design of the library in the first instance. So it's not just about council's occupation of that site and the library programs itself, but the other wraparound services that we'd need to think through quite carefully too.
Good, thank you. These are the answers I was hoping for. Just a comment, if I may, Madam Chair, on the PSG for the exhibition. Councillor Barker and I and Councillor Rotorua attended last week, and I must say it was very, very good and very enlightening, and it gives me a lot of confidence we're on the right track.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. We'll have that come to this meeting shortly. Councillor Maxwell, sorry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, ladies, for your presentation and your report. The question that I've got is on page 41 in regards to you're hoping to organise a hui with 28th Māori Battalion B Company whānau, which I encourage. Can you tell me what are some of the goals or the progress that we want to make with this hui?
Thank you, Councillor Maxwell. I might actually defer that to Joe as well. There's quite a history to the trust deed, and Joe's probably best placed to respond to those.
Kia ora, councillors. So with that meeting, it's currently planned for the 24th of May. And the specifics around that are, one, to reconstitute the Māori Battalion Trust, because B Company Trust has not really met for a couple of years at least. Graham Verco, who is the chair, is leading that. And what we're trying to do is engage with as many B Company whānau and descendants as we can to ensure that there's good representation on whatever that new trust looks like. For us as a museum, we are wanting to engage with whānau of B Company for the exhibition, and particularly at the moment to try and source as many photographs of those who served, so that we have as many on display as we possibly can, and also get as many contacts as we can, so we're engaging with them through the development of that exhibition.
Thank you very much. Councillor Wing.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and apologies for the lateness, and also apologies if this has already been covered off, but really great to see one of the focuses being improving the literacy as well. It's really important for our young people in our community. I just wanted to had a couple of questions. The first one was just around, now that the fine-free, I guess that's been implemented for a while now. How has that impacted the operations in terms of returning books and such?
Through you, Madam Chair. Yes, it's been pretty static. So whilst we're not charging people fines for not returning their books, we did see an initial drop in people not returning books. Then we had a little rise, and that's stagnated now, so it's pretty static. And we've got processes, obviously, to follow through that don't involve charging fines to our customers in terms of recovering those books.
Cool, that's great to hear. And the second one was just around a quick comment around looking forward for the library as well. It's really great to see that it's not just a library. I think it's a bit of a community space for our city, and so really we'll be excited to see how that transforms into the future, being, as Councillor Brown mentioned, a fit-for-purpose space for our community. The second question was just around I guess the customer focus as well, with what our CE has mentioned, and again, Councillor Brown stole my question there with the app. Looking at a platform for our community, and I know that certain other councils have engaged a third party to, I guess, to host that platform, being an app where they can log the requests, and also the council can put out community notices such as road closures and community events, and even the consultation. Would that be something that we'd look at as well, like morphing that into a tool for us to be able to reach out to the community?
Thank you, Councillor Wing. Through you, Madam Chair. Yes, so you've, Councillor, you've described a number of different use cases. And when we went out to market to understand whether a single tool would do those multiple use cases, what we got back through the process was for those really deep interactions that require individual customer data, so where you're looking at your building consent application, your dog registration, your parking charges or fines, there were a very limited number of portals that could do it because it required access to our core systems and the core data. Whereas there are a number of different platforms that could do a community engagement surveys, community engagement platform. So we've decided in the interest of speed that we're going to use the Participate platform for that community engagement, customer interaction, with the view that over time, if the core product that lets you interact with your own personal data and interactions with council has those capabilities, then we might migrate in the future. But we didn't want to hold back the whole digital engagement plan on the basis that our rollout of the One Council core module is not scheduled for at least 12 months away. So I hope that answers your question.
Okay, thank you. I've got two more questions and I think we'll wrap this up. We'll be at the morning adjournment then. So, Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Madam Chair, again. Some parents have expressed concerns to me about some of the books found, particularly in the children's section of the library. Do we have a policy which determines what books are found in the library?
Through you, Madam Chair, yes we do. We have a collections policy. I did actually ask the team just in the last 12 hours to run some data for me on how many complaints we've received directly through our official channels, and we've had 2 complaints which we've investigated and assessed and made a determination around. So we do. So if you do have, I'd encourage any complaints that have come to you to put them through our system, and we'll deal with them appropriately.
Great. Could I have a copy of the policy?
That is also an internal policy, so just, I guess, refer to you as... it is available online. Sorry, there you go. We will send you a link to it.
That would be great.
Councillor O'Brien, last question to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If I may, just feedback to yourself. Always being an easygoing sort of chap, I always support the Chair and their decisions, even when they're wrong. Even when they don't agree with how I feel. I don't endorse the previous question from Councillor Lee and how it was worded, particularly to staff. But some time ago, a few weeks ago, I was actually over at the Art Village, and there was an arts display which, with language personalised to a particular central government politician, which I would consider vile. However, being in a public space and that, you accept freedom of speech, I don't agree with how he's brought it up today, but I do think Councillor Lee has brought up an important point, and I'm not sure it's something we can put into a policy, because high courts around the world have had trouble distinguishing between pornography, what is art, what is freedom of speech, etc. But I do think we do have to have at some point, there's room for a community discussion around our venues, and at times we have exercised where council-owned venues have been denied certain, shall we say, groups or speakers on security grounds, etc., whatever. I think there is a wider conversation to be had at some point. I'm not saying today, or even perhaps it's this committee's place to have it, but if it's involving council, either entities or council-owned property, I do think that there is a wider conversation for the community to give us feedback at some point on what is their community expectations.
Thank you.
And whether, or standards, sorry, for want of a better word. I appreciate it's not going to be an easy discussion, nor is it going to be easy to come up with solutions that satisfy everybody, but I do think there is a wider conversation there to be had at some point. Thank you.
I think perhaps what Alex has highlighted is that there is opportunities for the public to provide feedback. And
that's for a library though, Madam Chair, as I say, there are other entities that we have, and I can show you photos of what I'm talking about later.
Okay. Well, maybe that's something that we'll just take offline, and you can discuss further with Alex and the team as to how that might be approached.
Well, I would think that, Councillor Lee is, we have had serious feedback, whether you were for or against the event that was proposed at the library or against. There were significant issues on both sides. So we can either put our heads under the sand and wait for it to happen again next time, or we can at least try and think of some sort of solutions to address those concerns in the future.
And I think we'll have that discussion with the staff, and then maybe we can come back, but it's probably not appropriate for them to answer, and obviously they don't have
No, that's why I haven't asked it to them. I've put it to you as our chair and the deputy mayor.
If you would send the material that you are concerned about, and then the staff can have a look at it, and we'll decide how we then deal with it.
I just want to make clear, sorry, it's not whether I'm concerned about it, it's about the fact that we have a level playing field across council. if we're going to have freedom of speech in total
I don't
on
think
one
we need to
place.
get into the details of it here. So
No, I totally agree.
So if you, as I said, forward the material to the staff, let them look at it, and Andrew can come back as to how it's appropriate for us to deal with
Thank you, Madam Chair.
type of information.
Point of clarification, Madam Chair. Surely it can't be right if we're spending ratepayers' money that elected members don't have oversight over how that ratepayers' money is spent. The idea of this being a management policy as opposed to one that's subject to the scrutiny of elected members, that would be
Councillor,
concerning to me.
Our role is around governance and strategic direction. It is
Yes.
for Andrew to run the operations of council. Obviously, we all have different opinions, and so it's going to be very hard for 11 different opinions to be dealt with operationally, and that's for the CE to deal with. So I think we've had a good discussion about that today. Points have been noted. I think we'll take the morning tea break now, and we'll come back at 11:15. Your worship.
Thank you. Sorry, I was just waiting for comments. I just wanted to acknowledge the staff. I know our customer services, as has mentioned, has had quite a bit of turnover, and I just really want to acknowledge that that is because people are going into other roles, but also the fact that the excellent customer service was still there and available during those times. So I do appreciate that. It is difficult, as in any role, if you don't have enough resource, but I just wanted to acknowledge how well I think they've been fielding the calls and also addressing the multiple different issues that customers come with. So special acknowledgement to the customer services team. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship, for that. Actually, councillors, I wondered if we just take, that's the end of the public section of the meeting, if I just take the resolution to move into public excluded, and then we'll take the break. So there are 3 items for public excluded. The consideration has been given to the public interest in these matters, but council's officer's advice is that the confidentiality outweighs the public interest. It's to protect the privacy of the persons, and there are also confidential minutes from the Community and District Development Committee of the 12th of March, appointment of members to the short-term rental accommodation working group, and reappointment of airport CCO board members. Can I have a mover and a seconder to exclude the public on the grounds contained in section 48(1) of the Local Government Official Information and Meetings Act? Thank you, Councillor Brown. Seconded by Councillor Barker. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Thank you. That is carried. We'll move into public excluded at when we resume at 11:15. Thank you.